Hey friends, welcome back to my kitchen. We're about to do a really cool experiment with crystallization and super saturation. Here's what you're going to need. You will need a pot of water and get that boiling. You'll also need an empty glass, make sure it's glass, a pipe cleaner or several pipe cleaners would be fine, as well as some wire or string, a pencil, or in this case, a chopstick. Maybe some oven mitts might come in handy as well as something to dissolve. So I've got borax, but you could also use table salt. Epsom salts work really well also. Well, go ahead and get all your supplies together and get that water boiling, and we'll begin. While you're waiting for your water to boil, and once you have all your supplies ready, work on folding your pipe cleaner and bending it into a really cool shape. I made a little star here, but you can try a heart or something else. What you do want to make sure is that it's going to fit into your glass jar. Sounds like the water is ready to go. Let's check on it. That looks like nicely boiling water. Now, something else I did, I took my borax I'm going to be mixing in, and I put it in another container, so that I can pour it in and not have to pour it straight from the box. Okay, I'm going to get one of these pot holders right here, grab this very, very hot water, make sure to turn off that burner, and I'm going to pour that water right into this glass jar. Not all the way to the top, but pretty close. Oh, right. Now, the next thing you're going to do is start to add your borax or Epsom salts or other salt. You want to add a bit, and then you want to stir it. See how I have a couple crystals on the bottom? You want to stir it up and make sure that those have dissolved. If you've ever tried to put something like this in water before, you'll notice that, well, it goes to the bottom at some point. Some of it will dissolve. But once we heat up the water, we can fit a lot more. Now, when we put sugar or salt or borax into water, and it's not dissolving anymore, and it's at room temperature, we've reached a point of saturation. But when we heat up the water, particles expand and we can fit more in, which means we can reach supersaturation, which is what we're going for right now. We want to keep adding more of this in until we can see it undissolved at the bottom of the glass. So keep adding more slowly, little bit by little bit. And when you reach that point where you see some on the bottom, let's keep going. So take a look. I've been adding and adding and stirring, and by the way, that liquid is still very hot, but look at the bottom. There are some borax crystals that have not dissolved. Well, that means I've reached supersaturation. So the next step is to take your little pipe cleaner creation, to grab that pencil or chopstick, as I have, and remember that string or wire I told you to have. Go ahead and tie that to the top, and then dip it right into the bath. If you notice that there's just not enough water, well, you can add just a little bit more. But remember, you just reached that point of supersaturation, so just a teeny little bit. You don't want to add too much. And you should be good to go. Now you're going to let this sit overnight or for the day, and what I might recommend is for you to come back and check on it constantly. Maybe even draw pictures of what starts to happen. And now I'm going to flip over and show you a little bit about what is happening with those particles. Over the next couple of hours, you are going to start to see crystals begin to grow in your glass and on the pipe cleaner. But why is that happening? Well, let's talk about bookshelves. Hey, here is a nice looking bookshelf, and it looks like it can hold a nice assortment of books. But Once we add enough books to it, we could say that our shelf has become saturated. We can't fit any more books on this bookshelf, but that's okay because they're all good books anyway. For the purpose of this demonstration, they're actually all the same book anyway, and that book is a really good book, like the very first illustrated edition of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or something like that. Anyway, what if we wanted to get more books, or in this case, more copies of this book? Or what if we already had a bunch of copies of that book to fit on this shelf? Well, there's no more room. But what if we could make our shelf follow the laws of liquids when they are heated? I mean, I know if we actually tried to heat a bookshelf, it would burn because it's made out of wood, but what if we could change it into a bookshelf made of water, just for the purpose of this experiment? Bam! It's done. Pretty cool, right? Well, if it's made of water, and if it is a liquid, once it is heated, it's going to expand. Wouldn't that be fantastic? If you could just heat a bookshelf up and cause it to expand so you could fit more books in it? Well, that's exactly what just happened with our bookshelf. And now we can fit more books on it, which is great because we just went out and got all those copies of this fantastic book. And once we fill this shelf up in this heated state, it's going to become super saturated with books. However, eventually all the heat that we gave to our bookshelf is going to disappear as our bookshelf cools down, which means eventually our shelf is going to shrink back down to its original size at room temperature. Uh-oh. What happens to all of those books? Well, they look pretty awkward alone, right? And we don't want to make a big mess. So, of course, we're going to start stacking them on the floor. They look pretty good together, all be in the same size and shape and all that. And what is essentially happening now is we've got book crystals growing. Well, not really, but this is essentially what is happening in our liquid as we grow crystals. Hey guys, welcome back. And it's been, well, pretty much a day since we started the crystal experiment, and I've just been watching them grow. Now, before I bring those out, just notice what I have out here. A piece of dark paper, that way I can view the crystals, and also a piece of paper towel. They're going to be coming out of a liquid solution, and we want to just dry that off. So, here are my crystals. Pretty cool, right? But maybe hard to see on that camera, so let me bring out my other one to show you a closer look. You can really see, look at that, even some fly fell in there and got crystallized, and then if you look on the bottom of the glass, there are crystals growing here, and then all over the pipe cleaner, crystals are growing. How cool is that? Well, let's take them out and take an even closer look, shall we? Because of my chopstick here, I can just lift it right out of the solution there. It is a little bit drippy. Now, I used borax. It's sort of like a soap. So it's not going to hurt anything necessarily, but I don't really want to get it all over the place. It'll leave sort of a white residue. So I'll want to make sure to clean up any that I spill. Same with the salt or the Epsom salt. Go ahead and be very gentle, and you can just lay your crystals down on the paper towel. And at that point, you can remove that pencil or chopstick. You can also take your glass out of here for the moment. All right. So we'll let that sit there and dry, but while it's drying, why don't we take another even closer look? As you can see, the crystals really have taken over. You can still see some of the pipe cleaners showing through in some areas, but there's all these beautiful, glistening geometrical constructions. Just think of that bookcase. Look at all those neatly stacked books, right? Well, really, particles. Borax contains some minerals that crystallize once they've reached that supersaturation and cooled down. Salt Epsom salt, and there's lots of other minerals. And so maybe some follow-up to this experiment would be to try some of those other things I mentioned, or maybe even think of something else that has minerals in it that might crystallize like this. Ooh, I'm getting really, really close. Some big crystals maybe, some small ones, and look at the shape of those crystals. What shape is that right there that you can see? And depending on what you used, what shape were your crystals? Were they bigger? Were they smaller? So, once it's dried enough, you can pick it up. You can touch it too. It's not dangerous, but depending on what you use, if you use something other than what I've just mentioned, you might not want to touch it. But once it is dry, you can lay it down on the paper and get an even better look at it. It's pretty, isn't it? I have another one here to share with you as well. You see, mine didn't get completely covered in crystals, and maybe I'm not satisfied with how it looks yet. Maybe I'd like to grow some more. Well, here's another one that I made. And you can see it's a heart. It had a white pipe cleaner in it, and so that's why you can't really see the color in there. Let me give you a closer look at that one as well. Look at that, and even with a different color of pipe cleaner makes a really cool effect. These could almost be like Christmas ornaments or fantastic gifts. I hang this one in the window to catch the sunlight sometimes. Now this is also borax, and if you look, you can see a similar pattern of construction in the crystals of these two. Now what I did with this one to get it so frosty is I re-dipped it. I took my solution and I poured it back into the pot, heated it back up into boiling, added a little bit more water, and then once I poured it in, all those crystals on the bottom, I had to stir it up a bit more. The water got very cloudy. I added just a little more borax to make sure it was super saturated. And then I re-dipped in this one and let it sit for another day, and then more crystals grew off that. So something else you might even want to try is dipping it a couple times, and does that have effects on the crystals? Or what about different surfaces? Now be careful with the surfaces you dip into these things and make sure they fit in your jar and that you have a way to suspend them or they'll crystallize to the bottom of the jar. But a seashell might be a great option, or maybe a piece of string. The cool thing about the pipe cleaner is that you can make these beautiful shapes. Well, I can't wait to see what you do with this experiment and the beautiful creations you make. Have fun, fellow scientists!